When I pulled the check for $20,000 from the envelope, my mother didn't gasp. She laughed. She told the gathered relatives it was a prop, a cruel joke, and warned me not to embarrass myself by trying to deposit it. But the signature was real. For the first time in 33 years, I realized the only way to survive this family was to do exactly what she told me not to. So, I took a picture and hit deposit. The air in the reception room of Clark and Galloway smelled of lemon furniture polish and the distinct, stale dust of old paper. It was a smell that belonged to the past, trapped in the heavy velvet drapes and the dark mahogany wainscoting that lined the walls. I sat in a wingback chair that was slightly too large for me. My hands folded in my lap, trying to make myself as small as possible. This was my default setting. Minimize the footprint, don't make noise, be the grease in the gears, not the wrench. My mother, Eleanor, sat across from me on a leather sofa, looking impeccably grieved. She was wearing a black dress that cost more than my car. The fabric draped perfectly over her slender frame. She was scrolling through her phone, her thumb moving with a rhythmic, aggressive swipe that betrayed her impatience. Next to her, my brother Kyle was inspecting his fingernails. He looked hungover, or maybe just bored. At 36, Kyle still carried himself with the unearned confidence of a high school quarterback who never realized the game ended 2 decades ago. We were here for the reading of the personal effects, not the will. That was a complex beast of trusts and assets that was being handled by the serious men in suits downtown. This was the sentimental distribution, the leftovers, the things my grandfather, Arthur, had specifically set aside before the dementia had taken the sharp edges off his mind. I expected nothing. Actually, that is not entirely true. I expected a task. I expected to be handed a box of old tax returns to shred, or a collection of dusty hardcovers to donate to the library. That was my role in the Henderson family. Stella the steward, Stella the sorter, Stella the one who handled the logistics while Eleanor and Kyle handled the legacy. Mr. Clark, a man whose skin possessed the same parchment texture as the files on his desk, opened the heavy oak door and beckoned us in. "Please, come in," he said. His voice was dry, like leaves scraping on pavement. We filed into his office. Eleanor took the chair closest to the desk. Naturally, Kyle took the one next to her. I took the folding chair set slightly back against the wall, the one presumably meant for a paralegal or a trailing spouse. Mr. Clark sat down and adjusted his spectacles. He didn't offer condolences. We were past that. He simply opened a folder. Arthur was very specific about these items. Mr. Clark said, he wanted them distributed personally, separate from the estate liquidation. He handed a small velvet box to Eleanor. For his daughter, he said. Eleanor opened it. Inside was the diamond brooch grandmother had worn in her portrait. Eleanor let out a soft, practiced sigh. "Lovely," she whispered, snapping the box shut. "Though I suppose I will have to have the setting checked. It looks loose." She dropped the box into her purse. "For Kyle, Mr. Clark said, sliding a heavy wooden case across the desk. Kyle perked up. He unlatched the case to reveal grandfather's 1968 chronometer. It was a beautiful watch, worth a few $1,000s at least. Kyle grinned, the first genuine expression I had seen on his face all day. "Nice," Kyle said, slipping it onto his wrist immediately. He didn't check if it fit. He just assumed it would. "Mr. Clark then turned his gaze to me. I straightened my spine, bracing myself for the box of paperwork. "And for Stella," he said. He held out a white, sealed envelope. It was thick, high-quality stationery. My name was written on the front in blue ink. The handwriting was shaky, but the loops of the S and the L were unmistakable. It was grandfather's hand. I stood up and took the envelope. It felt light. "Go on," Eleanor said, not looking at me. "Open it. Let's see what poetry he left for the help." I ignored the jab. I used my thumb to slide under the flap and tore it open. Inside, there was a single sheet of folded paper and a rectangular slip of paper that felt distinct, rigid, I pulled them out. The slip of paper was a personal check. My eyes scanned the numbers. 20000, $20,000. It was dated 3 weeks before he passed. The memo line read, "For your reset." I stared at it. The air left my lungs. $20,000 was not a fortune to Eleanor, who burned through that amount on a seasonal wardrobe refresh. But to me, I was a graphic designer for a non-profit. I drove a sedan with a rattling muffler. I lived in an apartment where the heating worked only on Tuesdays and Thursdays. $20,000 was a safety net. It was a year of rent. It was freedom. I unfolded the note attached to it. "Stella, for your reset, don't let anyone talk you out of it. Love, Grandfather." My hand trembled. I looked up, and I must have looked pale because Kyle laughed. "What is it?" Kyle asked. "Did he leave you a bill?" I couldn't speak. I just turned the check around so they could see it. The room went silent for a beat. Eleanor leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the document. Then, a sound cut through the silence, a sharp, barking laugh. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Eleanor said, leaning back and shaking her head. "That is rich, even for him." She looked at Mr. Clark, a conspiratorial smile on her face. He really lost his grip at the end. "Didn't he?" she said, writing checks he knew wouldn't clear. "It is almost sad." I looked at the check again. It looked real. The watermark was there. The signature was his. "What do you mean?" I asked. My voice sounded small in the wood-paneled room. "Honey," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with a pity that felt like acid, "look at the account number. Look at the bank. That is a prop. It is a joke. He probably thought it was funny. A little illusion for his favorite dreamer." Kyle leaned over and squinted at it. "Yeah, that bank barely exists anymore," he said, scoffing. "And Grandpa didn't have 20 grand in a personal checking account. Everything was in the trust. Mom controls the trust. That piece of paper is just a bookmark." "Stell." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, the familiar shame, the feeling of being the punchline. Of course. Why would he leave me money? I was the one who was supposed to work for it. I looked at Mr. Clark. "Is it valid?" I asked. The attorney shifted in his seat. He didn't look at Eleanor. He looked at his hands. "The check is formatted correctly." "Mr. Clark said carefully, "the signature matches our records for Mr. Henderson. But is there money behind it?" Eleanor cut in, her voice sharp. "Mr. Clark hesitated. "I cannot speak to the current balance of that specific account." He said, "It is not part of the main estate portfolio I manage. It appears to be a legacy account." Eleanor laughed again. "Exactly," she said, "a ghost account." She turned to me, her face arranging itself into a mask of maternal concern. "Stella, listen to me. Do not embarrass yourself by trying to cash that. The tellers will laugh at you. Or worse, they will flag you for fraud. It is a prop. Put it in a scrapbook. Frame it. But don't be stupid." Kyle slapped his knee. "Imagine Stella walking into Chase with a fake check," he said. "God, that would be tragic. You are desperate. We get it. But don't be pathetic." I looked at the check in my hand. "Don't let anyone talk you out of it." The words on the note seemed to vibrate. I carefully folded the check and the note and put them back into the envelope. I placed the envelope in my bag. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" Eleanor asked, raising an eyebrow. "Okay," I repeated. "I will keep it as a keepsake." "Good," she said, standing up and smoothing her dress. "At least you have some sense. Come on, Kyle, we have a reservation at Le Monde." She walked out without looking back. Kyle followed, pausing only to wink at me. "Don't spend it all in one place, kiddo," he said. I sat there for a moment. "Mr. Clark was watching me. I'm sorry for your loss." "Miss Henderson," he said softly. I looked at him. There was something in his eyes, a tightness. Like he wanted to say something but had been gagged by a very expensive retainer. "Thank you," I said. I walked out to the parking lot. The sun was blinding. Eleanor's Range Rover was already pulling out, cutting off a delivery truck as it merged onto the main road. I walked to my 10-year-old Honda. I sat in the driver's seat and just breathed. The leather of the steering wheel was hot against my palms. I pulled the envelope out again. A prop. Was it? I started the engine and began the drive home, the air conditioner blasting lukewarm air into my face. The route took me past the park where Grandfather used to take me when I was a kid. He would pick me up from school when Eleanor was too busy networking and Kyle was at football practice. I remembered one afternoon when I was 12. I had come out of school crying because a teacher had accused me of cheating on a test I had studied for all week. Eleanor had told me to just apologize and take the C so I wouldn't make waves. Grandfather had taken me for ice cream. He had sat across from me, his blue eyes sharp and clear. "Did you cheat, Stella?" he had asked. "No," I had sobbed. "But Mom says I should just be quiet." He had reached across the table and taken my hand. "Stella, some people confuse love with control," he had said. "Your mother likes the world to be smooth, but the truth is usually rough. Never apologize for the truth, even if it makes people uncomfortable." He had slipped me books over the years. 2. The Fountainhead, Jane Eyre, biographies of women who walked away from everything to build something of their own. He never gave them to me in front of Eleanor. It was always a slide across the table, a wink, a whisper. "Read this. Keep your mind sharp." He saw me. That was the thing. Eleanor saw a reflection of her own failures. Kyle saw a servant, but Grandfather saw me. Would he really play a joke like this? A $20,000 prank from the grave? It didn't fit. He had a dry sense of humor. Yes, but he wasn't cruel, and he knew my financial situation. He knew I was drowning in student loans and the high cost of living in a city that was rapidly outpricing me. To dangle this in front of me and snatch it away, that was Eleanor's style, not his. I reached my apartment building. It was a beige stucco box from the 70s, the kind of place that smelled permanently of damp carpet and other people's cooking. I walked up the 3 flights of stairs, unlocked my door, and threw my bag on the IKEA table. I took the check out and laid it on the cheap laminate surface. It looked so official. The heavy bond paper, the security pattern in the background. I opened my banking app on my phone. My balance stared back at me. $412.16. Rent was due in 5 days. If I deposited it and it bounced, the bank would charge me a fee. Maybe $30? I could afford $30, just barely. But if I deposited it and it was flagged as fraud, that was what Eleanor had warned me about. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. I paced the small living room. I looked at the note again. It was a command, a directive from the only person in my family who had ever respected me. If I didn't deposit it, Eleanor won. She got to define the narrative. She got to decide it was a joke. She got to keep me as the gullible, sweet, pathetic daughter who needed her protection. I grabbed my phone. I logged into the app. I selected mobile deposit. My hands were shaking. I had to take the picture of the front of the check 3 times because the camera wouldn't focus. Amount, $20,000.00. I flipped the check over. I signed the back, for mobile deposit only. I took the photo of the back. I hovered my thumb over the submit button. I could hear Eleanor's voice in my head. "Don't embarrass yourself." I thought about the way Kyle had laughed. I pressed the button. The screen spun for a moment. A little loading circle. "Success. Your deposit has been received." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. It was done. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of tap water. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I felt like I had just robbed a bank. Not deposited a check from my own grandfather. I checked the app again. Status, pending. Funds availability, estimated 2 business days. I sat on my couch and turned on the TV, letting the noise wash over me. I tried not to think about it. I tried to focus on the cooking show where a woman was aggressively kneading dough. Then, my phone buzzed. A text message from Mom. "I hope you threw that paper away. Honey, please don't embarrass yourself tomorrow by going to the bank. I'm only trying to protect you. We can discuss a small allowance from the trust next week if you are struggling." I stared at the screen. A small allowance. She knew. She knew exactly how to make me feel small. how to make me feel like a child reaching for a cookie jar she had placed on a high shelf. She was trying to protect me. That was her favorite phrase. She protected me from difficult colleges. She protected me from risky career moves. She protected me from boyfriends she didn't like. Every time she protected me, I ended up with less confidence, less agency, less life. I didn't reply. I put the phone face down. I slept fitfully that night. I dreamed of paper cuts. I dreamed of checks turning into leaves and blowing away in the wind while Eleanor laughed from a balcony. I woke up to the sound of my phone ringing. It wasn't my alarm. It was an incoming call. Unknown number. I sat up, my heart instantly in my throat. It was 8:15 a.m. "Hello?" I answered, my voice groggy. "Is this Stella Henderson?" A woman's voice asked. "Yes," I said. "This is Sarah from the Fraud Prevention Department at First National Bank. We are calling to verify a mobile deposit made last night in the amount of $20,000. My stomach dropped through the floor. Here it was, the humiliation. Eleanor was right. It was a fake. I was about to be scolded like a child. Yes, I said. "I deposited it. Is there a problem? Is it not real?" There was a pause on the line, the sound of typing. "No, Ms. Henderson, the check appears to be genuine." The woman said, "The reason for the call is the originating account." "What about it?" I asked. "It's an unusually old routing number," she explained. "We don't see many checks from this specific institution anymore. It dates back to a merger from the late 90s. The account itself has been dormant for a significant period. Our system flagged it because sudden activity on a dormant account is often a sign of compromise. We just need to verify that you are the intended recipient and that you have physical possession of the instrument." I blinked. Dormant, not fake. Dormant. "Yes," I said, my voice gaining a little strength. "It was a gift from my grandfather. He passed away recently." "I see," the woman said. "My condolences. Do you have the check with you now?" "Yes. Can you read me the sequence of numbers in the bottom left corner?" I read them to her. "Thank you," she said. "That matches. Okay, Ms. Henderson, I am going to clear the hold on our end. Since the issuing bank is a partner institution, the funds should be released shortly." "Wait," I said. "So, it's going to clear?" "Yes, ma'am. Is there anything else I can help you with?" "No," I said. "Thank you." I hung up. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the wall, dormant. Grandfather hadn't used that account in years, maybe decades, but he had kept it. He had kept it open, with at least $20,000 in it. Waiting. Waiting for what? For your reset. I stood up and went to the bathroom. I splashed cold water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes. Hair that needed washing. I looked like the Stella they all knew, the tired one. I walked back out to the living room and picked up my phone. I opened the banking app again. I refreshed the page. Total balance, $20,412.16. The notification banner at the top of the screen was green. Deposit cleared. I stared at the number. It was real. The money was there. But instead of relief, I felt a cold knot tighten in my gut. If the check was real, then the account was real. And if the account was real, then Eleanor hadn't just been mistaken. She hadn't just been making a cruel joke about a senile old man. She had looked at a valid check from her own father and told me it was a prop. She had tried to stop me from depositing it. She had humiliated me in front of the family and the attorney to ensure I wouldn't touch it. She wasn't protecting me. She was scared. She didn't want me to access that account. Why? I sat down on the floor, the phone still glowing in my hand. The text from last night, "I'm only trying to protect you," suddenly read very differently. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. I looked at the check again. The physical paper still sitting on my table. "Don't let anyone talk you out of it." Grandfather knew. He knew she would try to stop me. He knew she would lie. A terrifying thought bloomed in my mind. If she lied about this, what else had she lied about? And if this account was dormant, why was she so afraid of it waking up? I wasn't just $20,000 richer. I was holding a grenade, and I had just pulled the pin. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you get rid of that silliness? I'm coming over around noon. We need to talk about the funeral arrangements." I looked at the cleared balance. "No, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "I didn't get rid of it." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like answering the door. The silence in the apartment felt heavier now. The money in the account wasn't just currency, it was evidence. I checked the balance a third time, just to be sure. It hadn't disappeared. I needed to think. I needed to be smart. The Stella of yesterday would have called Mom immediately. "Look, you were wrong." It cleared. I would have sought her approval, or at least her apology, but the Stella of today, the Stella with $20,000, she felt a sudden, sharp instinct for self-preservation. If I told her, she would demand the money. She would say it was a mistake. She would say it belonged to the trust. She would guilt me until I wrote her a check just to make the tension stop. Some people confuse love with control. I stood up, I walked to the window and looked out at the street. The world looked exactly the same as it had yesterday, but the tint had changed. The gray was sharper. The shadows were deeper. I wasn't the punchline anymore. I was the problem. And I had a feeling that by the time noon rolled around, Eleanor was going to realize that her prop had just become very, very real. I needed to be ready. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. Black, no sugar. I had a secret. And in the Henderson family, secrets were the only currency that mattered more than money. I took a sip of the bitter coffee and waited for the war to start. The digital numbers on my phone screen seemed to pulse with a radioactive glow. $20,412. It was enough money to change my life. But in that moment, it felt less like a windfall and more like stolen goods. I sat at my kitchen table, the morning light filtering through the grime of the window I kept meaning to clean. My thumb hovered over the transfer button. My banking app allowed for the creation of sub-accounts, little digital buckets for specific savings goals. I usually had one labeled car repairs and another labeled Christmas, neither of which ever held more than $200. I created a new one. I hesitated on the name. I didn't want to call it Grandpa or Inheritance or anything that would flag a casual observer. I typed in taxes, boring, invisible. I moved the $20,000 into taxes. As soon as the confirmation screen appeared, a wave of nausea rolled over me. I was terrified of the reversal. I had read stories about this. The bank makes a mistake, the funds appear, you spend them, and then 3 days later, the error is caught and the bank claws the money back, leaving you in the red. But the fraud department had said it was clear. The deposit had settled. I checked the time. It was 9 a.m. Why did I feel so guilty? I hadn't stolen it. He gave it to me. For your reset. I realized then that the guilt wasn't natural. It was conditioned. It was a reflex installed by 33 years of Eleanor Henderson, telling me that I wasn't capable of handling adult things. Hiding the money felt illicit, because I was hiding it from the people who had appointed themselves the managers of my life. I was hiding it from the people who didn't want me to have it. My phone buzzed on the table, making me jump. The screen lit up with a photo of my mother. A picture I had taken years ago where she was looking away from the camera, elegant and distant. I stared at it. I considered letting it go to voicemail. No, that would trigger an alarm. If I didn't answer, she would assume I was spiraling. She would come over. I slid the icon to answer and put the phone to my ear. "Hi, Mom," I said, forcing my voice to sound flat. "Stella." "Darling," her voice chirped. It was a tone I knew well. It was the tone she used when she was hosting a charity brunch or trying to get a refund from a difficult salesperson. It was bright, sugary, and completely synthetic. "Hi," I said again. Warier now. "I was just thinking about you," she said. "I felt so terrible about yesterday. I know how emotional these things can be, and I didn't want you to feel, well, embarrassed. It was a difficult day for all of us." I said nothing. I looked at the coffee cup in front of me. "Anyway, she continued, breezy as a summer wind. I am going to be near your apartment later. I thought I could swing by. I want to take a look at that check Grandpa gave you. My grip tightened on the phone. Why? I asked. Well, to help you. Of course, she said. I called our banker at Chase, the one who handles the family trust, and I mentioned the mix-up. He said if you give me the physical check, I can bring it in and have them look at it properly. Maybe we can get it sorted out without you having to deal with the rejection at the teller window. You know how sensitive you are about those things. The lie was so smooth it was almost admirable. She wanted physical possession of the check. She wanted to handle it. If I gave it to her, it would disappear into a shredder or into a file labeled Arthur's dementia incidents. I already deposited it. I said. The silence on the other end was absolute. It lasted for 3 seconds, but it felt like an hour. You what? Her voice had dropped an octave. The sugar was gone. I deposited it last night. I said, through the app. Stella, she said, her voice sharp and low. I told you not to do that. You are going to trigger a fraud alert. You are going to get your account frozen. Why do you never listen? It cleared. Mom, I said, what? It cleared. The money is in my account. Silence again. This time, I could hear her breathing. It wasn't the breathing of someone who was relieved her daughter wasn't in trouble. It was the breathing of someone who was recalibrating a strategy. That is impossible, she said finally. That account. It shouldn't have funds. Why not? I asked. Because, Stella, she snapped. Because everything was consolidated years ago. Listen to me. Don't spend a dime of it. It is a banking error. If you spend it, you will be liable when they correct it. Do you hear me? Do not touch it. I hear you. I said, I am coming over. She said, no. I said, I looked at the messy apartment, the pile of laundry on the chair. No, I am going out. I have errands. Stella, I have to go. Mom, I will see you at dinner on Sunday? I hung up. My hand was shaking. She was scared. She wasn't worried about me bouncing a check. She was worried about the check clearing. I needed to be sure. The app said it was cleared. But I needed a human being to look me in the eye and tell me it was real. I needed to know where it came from. I grabbed my purse, the physical check, which I had carefully placed back in its envelope, and my keys. The branch of my bank was located in a strip mall between a pet supply store and a dry cleaner. It was quiet inside, smelling of carpet cleaner and money. I waited in line behind a man depositing a stack of cash from a landscaping business. When it was my turn, I walked up to the window. The teller was a young man with a name tag that read, David. Hi, I said. I just want to verify the status of a deposit I made last night. I want to make sure the funds are fully settled before I move anything. I slid my debit card across the counter. David swiped it and typed on his keyboard. Okay, Miss Henderson, he said. Let me take a look. He stared at the screen. He squinted slightly. Okay, he said. I see the mobile deposit. $20,000. Is it good? I asked. I mean, is it fully released? David tapped a few more keys. Yeah, he said. It's posted. Available balance reflects the deposit. You're good to go. I let out a breath. Can I ask you something? I asked, lowering my voice. Can you tell where it came from? My grandfather left it to me, but my mother seems to think the account shouldn't exist. David looked at me, then back at the screen. He clicked on a line item to expand the details. It's an electronic image, so I can see the routing data. He said, it looks like it was drawn on a trust account. A trust? I asked. Yeah, he said. The account name on the originating bank side is listed as, let me see here. It's abbreviated. W, B, const, op. No, wait, that's the memo. The account title is The Sparrow Ledger. The Sparrow Ledger? I repeated. Never heard of it, David said, shrugging. But the routing number is for a regional bank that got bought out by Wells Fargo a long time ago. It's an old structure, but the funds are good. It's not a personal checking account, that's for sure. It's a commercial or trust entity. The Sparrow Ledger. Thank you. David, I said, I walked back to my car. Sparrow. My grandfather loved birds. He used to keep a bird feeder in the backyard of the big house, battling the squirrels to keep it full for the cardinals and the finches. But a sparrow? Sparrows were common. They were everywhere. They were the birds nobody noticed. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my phone. I searched for the Sparrow Ledger. Nothing. I searched for Arthur Henderson's Sparrow Trust. Nothing. I needed to talk to the source. I dialed the number for Clark and Galloway. Reception. A woman's voice answered. Hi, this is Stella Henderson. I was in yesterday for the reading of Arthur Henderson's effects. I need to speak with Mr. Clark. One moment. Please. Hold music. Violin concertos interrupted by static. Miss Henderson? Mr. Clark's voice came on the line. He sounded different than he had yesterday. Tighter. Hi, Mr. Clark. I said, I have a question about the check. I cannot discuss financial details over the phone. Stella? He cut in. I just need to know what the Sparrow Ledger is. I said, I deposited the check. Mr. Clark. It cleared. The bank said it came from the Sparrow Ledger. Silence. I could hear him shifting in his chair. You deposited it, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. And your mother? Does she know? Yes. Mr. Clark sighed. It was a heavy, weary sound. Stella, I need you to come in. Not to the main office. I have a satellite office in Westbury. It's smaller. Can you meet me there tomorrow at 10 o'clock? Why? I asked. What is going on? Your grandfather anticipated questions. Mr. Clark said. He anticipated that you might face resistance. He left instructions for you, separately from the will, separately from the family. Mr. Clark said. And Stella? Do not tell your mother you are meeting with me, please. Why? Because I work for the estate. Stella. But in this specific matter, I am working for Arthur, and he was very clear about the conditions of disclosure. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I will text you the address. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs. Separately from the family, I drove home on autopilot. When I walked into my apartment, I felt a vibration in my pocket. I pulled out my phone. It was a notification from Facebook. My brother, Kyle. I didn't follow Kyle closely. His feed was mostly photos of him at golf courses or reposting hustle culture memes, but the algorithm knew we were related. I clicked on the notification. It was a text post, set against a black background. It's funny how death reveals people's true colors. Some of us are mourning a great man, and some people are just chasing inheritance clout. Grief isn't a transaction. Respect the legacy. Don't try to cash in on it. Family values. Real talk. My stomach turned. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. Anyone who knew us, anyone who had been at the funeral, would know exactly who he was talking about. He was framing the narrative. I was the greedy sister. I was the one trying to cash in. I scrolled through the comments. So sorry you have to deal with that. Bro, money makes people crazy. Stay strong. Praying for your family. They were buying it. Of course they were. Kyle was the charismatic one, the loud one. If he said I was the villain, I was the villain. I threw the phone on the couch. I felt tears pricking my eyes. Hot and sudden. This was the trap. This was how they did it. They isolated you. They made you doubt your own reality. I needed an anchor. I texted Maya. Coffee? Emergency. Maya was already at our usual spot when I arrived. A latte waiting for me. She was the only person in my life who knew the full extent of the Henderson madness. She had been there when Eleanor forgot to pick me up from the airport, leaving me stranded for 4 hours. She had been there when Kyle borrowed my identity to sign up for a gym membership he never paid for. I sat down and slid my phone across the table, showing her the bank balance. Holy sh... Maya stopped herself, looking around. 20,000? It cleared. I whispered, so it wasn't a prop. She said, no, it was real. And now Mom is freaking out. She called me. She tried to get me to give her the check. She said she wanted to handle it with the bank. Maya raised an eyebrow. Handle it? Like, make it disappear? Exactly. And Kyle is posting vague insults about me online. I showed her the post. Maya read it and rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might get stuck. "He is such a child," she said. "Inheritance clout? What does that even mean? You're a graphic designer." "Stella, not a SoundCloud rapper." I laughed. A short, hysterical sound. I saw the attorney. I said, "Well, I spoke to him. He wants to see me privately. He said Grandpa left instructions." Maya leaned in, her elbows on the table. "Okay, this is getting into murder mystery territory." She said, "But listen to me. The most important question isn't about the money. What is it? Why did your mother want you to fail?" I looked at my latte foam. "She thinks I'm incompetent." I said, "She thinks I'll mess it up." "No," Maya said firmly. "That's the lie she tells you. Think about it. Stella, if she thought it was a fake check, she would have let you deposit it. She would have let you walk into the bank and get embarrassed. That's her style, right?" "I told you so." "She loves I told you so." I nodded slowly. That was true. Eleanor loved to watch me fail when she had predicted it, but she didn't want you to deposit this. Maya said, "She tried to stop you. She publicly shamed you to prevent you from trying. That means she knew it would clear. And she didn't want you to have the money. Why? Because she hates me?" I suggested. Maya shook her head. "No, hate is too simple. This is strategic. $20,000 gives you options. Stella, it gives you a buffer. If you have money, you don't need her. You don't need to ask for help with rent. You don't need to endure her loans that come with strings attached. Control." I whispered. "Control." Maya agreed. "She's losing leverage. And if there is a secret trust, if there is more money, she loses all the leverage. You need to go to that meeting with the attorney, and you need to record it." I nodded. My phone buzzed again. "Mom calling." "Don't answer it." Maya said. I stared at the screen. "I have to." I said, "If I don't, she'll come to my apartment. She has a key. Change the locks." Maya said. I answered the phone. "Hello?" "Stella," Eleanor said. Her voice was calm now, controlled. "I am having a family dinner tonight. Just us. And Kyle. I made your favorite roast chicken. Mom, I don't really feel like—" "Nonsense," she cut in. "We need to clear the air. Tensions were high yesterday. I want us to sit down as a family. 7 o'clock. Be on time." She hung up before I could say no. I looked at Maya. "She wants me to come to dinner." I said, "It's a trap." Maya said, "I know." I said, "But I have to go. I need to see what she knows." The Henderson house was a sprawling colonial on the hill, the kind of house that looked impressive from the street, but felt cold on the inside. I parked my Honda next to Kyle's leased BMW. I walked up the path, my stomach twisting. I had the $20,000 in my secret account. I had the meeting with Mr. Clark tomorrow. I had armor. I opened the door. "You're late," Kyle called out from the living room. It was 7:01 p.m. "Hi, Kyle," I said, walking in. Eleanor came out of the kitchen, wearing an apron over her cashmere sweater, the perfect mother. "Stella," she exclaimed, coming over to hug me. The hug was stiff. She smelled of white wine and expensive perfume. "I am so glad you came." We sat in the dining room. The table was set with the good china, roast chicken, glazed carrots, wild rice. It looked delicious. It felt like a courtroom. "So," Eleanor said, pouring me a glass of wine, "have you had a chance to relax today?" "I worked a bit." I lied. Kyle was scrolling on his phone under the table. I could see the glow lighting up his chin. "About that check," Eleanor said casually, passing the carrots. "I was talking to Kyle, and we are just so worried about you getting scammed. You know how sophisticated these things are now, even if the bank thinks it's clear. Sometimes they come back weeks later. It's not a scam." "Mom," I said, serving myself rice. "How do you know?" Kyle asked. Looking up, "Did you spend it yet?" "No," I said. "Good," Eleanor said. "Because here's the thing. Stella, the banks have this system called batch processing. Sometimes they release funds as a courtesy before they actually verify the source, especially with mobile deposits. It's a loophole." I paused with my fork halfway to my mouth. How do you know that? I asked. Know what? How do you know about batch processing and mobile deposit loopholes? You still write paper checks for the gardener. Eleanor blinked. A tiny crack in the mask. I read about it, she said quickly, in the Wall Street Journal. The point is, I don't want you to get your hopes up. In fact, I was thinking, if you transfer that money to me, I can put it in the main trust holding account. It will be safer there. And if the bank reverses it, the trust can absorb the fee. Not you. I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. Transfer it to you, I asked. Just for safekeeping, she said, smiling. And Kyle kept glancing at his phone, then at me, then at his phone, like he was waiting for a signal. I'm going to keep it where it is, I said. Eleanor's smile tightened. Stella, don't be stubborn. We are trying to help you. Why does the name The Sparrow Ledger mean anything to you? I asked. The silence that fell over the table was sudden and absolute. Kyle stopped chewing. Eleanor went perfectly still. Her eyes, usually so expressive, went flat. Where did you hear that name? She asked softly. The bank. I said, that's the account the money came from. The Sparrow Ledger. Eleanor put her fork down. The metal clinked loudly against the china. That is a dormant administrative entity, she said. It was closed years ago. It's a mistake. If it's closed, how did the check clear? I asked. It's a mistake, she snapped. Her voice rose, cracking the veneer of the pleasant dinner. It is a clerical error, and when they find it, they are going to come after you for fraud. Stella, I am trying to save you from prison. Prison? I asked. For depositing a gift? Kyle laughed, but it sounded nervous. Don't be dramatic, Mom. She's not going to prison, but seriously. Stell, just give the money back. It's not yours. Give it back to whom? I asked. To Grandpa? To the family, Eleanor yelled. It belongs to the family. She stood up. Her face was flushed. You are being selfish, Stella, just like your father was, always thinking you are smarter than everyone else. I stood up too. My legs were shaking, but I forced myself to stand my ground. I'm keeping the money. Mom, it's for my reset. I turned and walked out. Stella, come back here. I grabbed my purse and walked out the front door. I got into my car and locked the doors. I saw the front curtain move. Kyle was watching me. I reversed out of the driveway and sped down the hill. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The Sparrow Ledger. She knew it. She knew exactly what it was, and she was terrified of it. I drove for 10 minutes, just putting distance between myself and that house. I turned onto a quiet road that led back toward town. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Restricted number. I let it ring 3 times. Then I answered. Hello? The voice was male, calm, unfamiliar. It didn't sound like anyone from the bank or the law office. Stella Henderson? Yes. Listen to me carefully, the voice said. I don't have much time. Your grandfather kept a box for you. A box? I asked. Who is this? That doesn't matter. He kept a box. It's not at the main bank. It's at the credit union on 4th Street. The key is coming. What key? The voice ignored me. Do not tell your mother. Do not tell your brother. Do not bring family to the credit union. If you do, the box disappears. Do you understand? I don't. Do you understand? The voice repeated. It was sharp now. Urgent. Yes. I said, I understand. Good. Trust the paper trail, not the people. Click. The line went dead. I pulled the car over to the side of the road. My headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating a patch of weeds and a discarded soda can. I sat there in the silence, the engine idling, a box, a key, the Sparrow Ledger. This wasn't just about a $20,000 check. It wasn't just about a senile old man leaving a tip for his granddaughter. Grandfather had built a labyrinth. He had constructed a secret infrastructure underneath the family business, underneath Eleanor's nose, and he had hidden me in the center of it. Why? Because he knew. He knew they would eat me alive if he left me anything through the normal channels. He knew they would steal it, or guilt me out of it, or claim I was incompetent. He had to make it a game, a test. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. That was the first test. If I had listened to Eleanor, if I had torn up the check, the game would have ended there. I would have failed. But I deposited it. I passed the first gate. And now, the real game was beginning. I looked at my phone. No new messages. But I knew they were coming. The guilt trips, the threats, the gaslighting. I put the car in drive. I wasn't the responsible one anymore. I wasn't the helper. I was the player, and I was going to win. The satellite office of Clark and Galloway was located in Westbury, a town 20 miles east that had seen better days. Unlike the main firm's polished oak and brass headquarters, this office was tucked into a strip of red brick buildings that housed a dentist and a vacuum repair shop. The sign on the door was faded, the gold lettering peeling away at the corners. I parked my Honda and sat for a moment, checking my mirrors. I felt ridiculous, like I was in a spy movie. But the events of the last 24 hours had rewired my brain. The text messages from my mother had stopped, which was more terrifying than the barrage. Silence from Eleanor Henderson usually meant she was reloading. I walked into the office. It was small, smelling of old carpet and burnt coffee. There was no receptionist, just a bell on the counter. I rang it. A door in the back opened, and Mr. Clark stepped out. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket today. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing thin, pale arms. He looked older here, away from the grandeur of his mahogany desk. "You came," he said. "I deposited the check." I said, it was the only greeting that felt appropriate. "Mr. Clark nodded. He unlocked the gate that separated the waiting area from the back. "Come on back. Stella." His office here was cramped, stacked high with banker's boxes. He cleared a chair for me. "I assume your mother is not happy," he said, sitting down behind a metal desk. "She is furious." I said, "She told me the check was a prop. She told me the account was dormant. She tried to get me to transfer the money to her for safekeeping." Mr. Clark offered a tight, grim smile. "Arthur predicted all of that," he said. He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. It was thinner than the one from the reading. The check for $20,000 was not the inheritance. "Stella." "Mr. Clark said, "It was a test." "A test?" "Your grandfather knew that if he left you a significant sum outright, or access to sensitive documents, your family would bully you into surrendering it. They would use guilt, or fear, or your own good nature against you. They would say you were incompetent. They would say they were protecting you." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "So he created a contingency." He continued, "The check was designed to be small enough to be dismissed as a senile error, but large enough to matter to you. The instructions he left with me were explicit. If Stella shreds the check or hands it over to Eleanor, the matter is closed. The rest of the estate remains sealed under the existing trust. But if Stella deposits the check, if she defies the pressure and claims what is hers, then she is ready for the rest." My throat felt dry. "So if I had listened to my mother," I said, "then we wouldn't be having this conversation." He said, "And the items in this envelope would have been destroyed 10 years from now." Unread. He slid the envelope across the desk. "You passed. Stella." I stared at the envelope. I didn't reach for it yet. "What is it?" I asked. "Access," he said. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single brass key. It looked heavy, old-fashioned. There was also a card with an address for a credit union on 4th Street, a place I had driven past 1,000 times and never entered. "The account you deposited the check into, the Sparrow Ledger, is a holding entity," Mr. Clark explained. "It is not the main family trust. It is a side structure your grandfather built quietly over the last 15 years. He began moving assets into it when he started to suspect that the numbers at Henderson Development weren't adding up." Henderson Development, the family business. My father had run it until he died, and then Uncle Marcus, and now it was ostensibly managed by a board, but Eleanor and Kyle drew their allowances from its profits. "Suspect what?" I asked. "Misconduct?" Mr. Clark leaned back. "Arthur was a sharp man. Stella, Even when his health declined, he noticed things. Margins shrinking when the market was up. Vendor payments to companies he didn't recognize. He tried to bring it up, but he was managed. Your mother and brother were very good at managing him. They told him he was confused. They told him the industry had changed. Gaslighting? I whispered. Mister? Clark nodded. Precisely. He realized he couldn't stop it without blowing up the family, and he wasn't strong enough for that fight in his 80s. So he focused on saving what he could, and he focused on you. Why me? I asked. I'm the one who knows nothing about business. I'm the graphic designer, the responsible one who just folds napkins. Because you are the only one who never asked him for money. Mr. Clark said, and because you are the only one he trusted not to collude with them. He pointed to the key. That key opens safety deposit box number 402 at the credit union. The box is registered to the Sparrow entity. You are the sole authorized signatory as of this morning. What is in it? Evidence, Mr. Clark said, and a choice. He stood up. I cannot go with you. Stella, my role was to deliver the key. Whatever you do next is up to you, but I suggest you go now, before the family realizes that the dormant account has a very active pulse. The drive to the credit union felt like driving through a minefield. Every car that pulled up behind me looked like Eleanor's Range Rover. Every notification on my phone made me flinch. The credit union was quiet. It was a working-class bank, the kind with free lollipops and tellers who knew the customers by name. I walked to the front desk. I need to access a safety deposit box, I said. My voice was steady, surprising me. I am a signatory for the Sparrow Ledger. The woman behind the counter didn't blink. She asked for my ID. She checked a binder. She typed something into her computer. Okay, Miss Henderson, she said. Do you have your key? I held up the brass key. Right this way. She led me into the vault. It was a wall of steel drawers, floor to ceiling. The air was cool and smelled of metal. Box 402, she said, locating a drawer at waist height. She inserted her master key into one lock. I inserted my key into the other. We turned them in unison. The lock clicked. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a small private room. Take your time, she said, closing the door behind her. I was alone, just me, a table, and a gray metal box. I sat down. My hands were trembling again. I took a deep breath, trying to channel the version of myself that had deposited the check. The version that was done being managed. I opened the lid. The box wasn't full, but what was there looked dense. On top was a leather-bound ledger. The corners worn soft. Next to it was a silver USB drive. Underneath those was a thick envelope sealed with wax, and a stack of paper clipped together. I reached for the envelope first. It had my name on it. I broke the wax seal. I pulled out 3 sheets of yellow legal pad paper, covered in grandfather's sprawling handwriting. My dearest Stella, if you are reading this, it means you were brave enough to claim the small gift. I knew you could be. You have a spine. My dear, even if your mother has spent 30 years trying to convince you it is made of wishbone, I am writing this because I am a coward. I should have fixed this while I was alive. I should have stopped Eleanor and Kyle when I first saw the cracks. But I was old, and I was tired, and I told myself that keeping the peace was worth the price. I was wrong. Your mother and brother have been borrowing from tomorrow for a long time. They live a life they cannot afford, funded by a business that cannot sustain it. But it is not just bad management, Stella. It is theft. They have been stripping the copper out of the walls to buy champagne. I have gathered what I could. Copies of checks, notes from meetings they thought I was too deaf to hear. It is all in the ledger and the drive. I am leaving this to you not to burden you, but to arm you. You are the only one who can stop it, because you are the only one they haven't corrupted. They think you are weak. Use that. Let them underestimate you until it is too late. This will be hard. They will attack you. They will say you are crazy. They will try to destroy your reputation to save their own. You have a choice. You can close this box, walk away, and let the house of cards fall when it falls. And it will fall. Or you can choose truth over peace. I am sorry I left you with a war. But I also left you the ammunition. Love, Grandpa. I put the letter down. Tears were streaming down my face, hot and fast. He knew. He saw it all. And he saw me. Choose truth over peace. I wiped my face and reached for the stack of papers. They were photocopies of canceled checks. I flipped through them. Check number 4056. Dated 5 years ago. Amount? $8,000. Payee. K.H. Consulting. Signed, Arthur Henderson. I looked closely at the signature. It said, Arthur Henderson, but the slant was wrong. The A was too sharp. The loop of the H was too tight. I pulled another one. Check number 4090. Amount? $12,500. Payee, Eleanor Gable. Signed, Arthur Henderson. Again. The signature was slightly off. It was a good forgery. Practiced. But to someone who had just spent 10 minutes staring at his real handwriting on the letter, the difference was screaming. They had been forging his name. I opened the leather ledger. It was a handwritten record of the business accounts. Grandfather had been keeping his own books parallel to the official ones. June 12, 2018. $50,000 withdrawn for capital improvements. No improvements made. Money traced to account linked to Kyle's gambling debt. August 4th, 2019. Invoice from Gable Interiors for office renovation. Office was painted by maintenance staff. Invoice paid to Eleanor. Page after page. Years of it. They weren't just skimming off the top. They were hollowing the company out. The family business was a carcass, and they were the vultures picking the bones while pretending to be the caretakers. I looked at the USB drive, digital copies. I assumed scans, emails. I put everything back in the box except the USB drive and the photocopies of the forged checks. I slipped those into my purse. I locked the box. I walked out of the credit union. The sun was shining, but the world felt gray and sharp. I wasn't just a granddaughter anymore. I was a witness. I needed an expert. I couldn't take this to the family attorney. Clark and Galloway represented the estate, which technically meant they represented the board, Eleanor and Kyle. Mr. Clark was helping me on the side, but he couldn't fight this battle for me. Mr. Clark had slipped a business card into the envelope with the key. Marcus Gwen. Forensic Accounting. Confidential. His office was on the second floor of a walk-up building downtown, above a dry cleaner. It didn't look like much. No mahogany here, either. Just metal filing cabinets and a desk that looked like it had been bought at a surplus auction. Marcus Gwen was a man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a calm, unhurried manner. He didn't offer me coffee. He just asked to see what I had. I laid the photocopies and the USB drive on his desk. My grandfather suspected my mother and brother were embezzling from the family business. I said, "He left me these." Marcus put on a pair of jeweler's loupes and looked at the signatures on the photocopies. He hummed, a low, vibrating sound in his chest. "The pressure points are wrong," he said, pointing to the ink density on the copy. "See here? When a person signs their own name, the muscle memory is fluid. The pen moves fast. Here, on the loop, the ink is heavier. That suggests a pause. The hand was hesitating, tracing a shape rather than writing a name. He looked up at me. This is a forgery, a decent one, but a forgery. He plugged the USB drive into an air-gapped laptop, one not connected to the internet. He clicked through a few files. He whistled softly. "What is it?" I asked. "This isn't just skimming." "Miss Henderson," he said, "this is systemic extraction. Look at this." He turned the screen toward me. It was a spreadsheet. They set up vendor accounts, he explained, pointing to a list of names. Apex Supply, Gable Interiors, KH Consulting. These companies bill the main business for services, materials, consulting, design. The business pays them. But if I dig into these companies, which I will bet your grandfather did, I will find they have no employees, no offices, and no inventory. They are mailboxes. The money goes in, and then it goes straight to your family's personal accounts. How long? I asked, going back at least 7 years, judging by this file. Marcus said, "It's called bleeding the beast. You take just enough that the company doesn't collapse immediately, but you starve it of capital. Eventually, the business fails, the creditors get nothing, and the owners walk away with the cash they siphoned off. They are killing the company. I said, "They already killed it." Marcus said, "It's a zombie. It's walking around, but it's dead. The only thing keeping it upright is likely loans or lines of credit they are taking out based on false financials." He looked at me over his glasses. "If this comes out, Miss Henderson, this is criminal. This is bank fraud, tax fraud, embezzlement. People go to prison for this." The weight of it settled on my shoulders. Prison, my mother in an orange jumpsuit, Kyle in handcuffs. I thought about the dinner last night. I am trying to protect you. She wasn't protecting me from the bank. She was protecting herself from me. "Can you prove it?" I asked. "With these documents?" Marcus tapped the drive. "I can build a very compelling map, but we need originals. We need the actual bank records from the business to match against these ledgers." I nodded. "Keep the drive." I said, "Start building the map." I drove back to my apartment in a daze. It was late afternoon. The shadows were stretching long across the street. I walked up the stairs. My keys jangling in my hand, I felt exposed, like the walls of the building were glass. I got inside and locked the door. I put the chain on. My phone rang. It was Eleanor. I stared at it. I could let it go to voicemail. I could hide. Choose truth over peace. I picked up. "Hello? Stella." Eleanor's voice was ice, cold, hard, and brittle. "Hi, Mom. I just got off the phone with Mrs. Gable." She said, Mrs. Gable was one of Eleanor's bridge friends, a woman with hair like a helmet and eyes like a hawk. "Oh?" I said. "She was at the credit union on 4th Street today." Eleanor said, "She was depositing checks for her husband's shop. She said she saw you." I said nothing. "She said she saw you walking into the vault with a clerk, using a safety deposit box." The silence on the line was thick with tension. "Did you rob a bank?" "Stella?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "Or did you find something that doesn't belong to you?" "It belongs to me." "Mom," I said, "the box is in my name." "What box?" she screamed. The veneer snapped. The polite society matron was gone. "What box did he give you?" "The one you didn't know about," I said. "You ungrateful little brat," she hissed. "After everything I did for you? After I paid for your braces? After I got you into that school? You are going behind my back? You are digging through things you don't understand." "I understand plenty." I said, "I understand that signatures can be forged." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "What did you say?" she whispered. "I said I know about the signatures." "Mom, I saw the checks." "Stella, listen to me," she said. Her voice shifted gears instantly. It went from rage to panic to a terrifying kind of pleading. "You don't know what you are looking at. Business is complicated. Sometimes we have to do things to keep the cash flow moving. Grandpa was sick. He couldn't sign things fast enough. We were helping him. We were keeping the business alive for the family. For you." "For me?" I asked. "By paying Gable Interiors $50,000 for painting an office that wasn't painted?" "Stop it," she said. "Stop it right now. You are going to ruin us. You are going to ruin the family name. Do you want that? Do you want to be the reason your brother goes to, the reason we lose everything?" I felt the old guilt rising, the conditioning. Don't make waves. Don't be the problem. I don't want to hurt anyone. I stammered. "Then bring me the key," she said. "Bring me whatever you took from that box. We can burn it. We can pretend this never happened. I will give you the 20,000. I will give you 50,000. Just bring it to me. Tonight." I closed my eyes. "It would be so easy. Just give it up. Go back to being the good daughter. Take the money and pretend I didn't see the rotting corpse of the family legacy. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. The note, the check, the test. No." I said, "What? No. Mom, I'm not bringing you the key." "Stella, I'm hanging up now." I ended the call. I turned the phone off. I threw it onto the couch cushions. My heart was beating so fast it hurt. I felt like I was going to throw up. I had just declared war. But I wasn't done. I went to my laptop. I still had the USB drive. Marcus had kept the data, but I had copied the files to my hard drive before I left his office. I needed to see the rest. I sat down at my kitchen table and opened the folder labeled Scans. I clicked on a file named trust_summary_2015.pdf. It was a legal document outlining the beneficiaries of the Henderson Family Trust. Primary beneficiaries: Eleanor Henderson Gable, 50%; Kyle Henderson, 30%; Stella Henderson, 20%. Wait, I had a 20% stake? I had always been told that the trust was discretionary, controlled entirely by Mom, and that I had no fixed claim. I scrolled down. There was a second document attached. Amendment Request, 2019. It was a letter addressed to the trust administrators, requesting the removal of Stella Henderson as a beneficiary due to mental instability and estrangement. It was signed by Eleanor Henderson Gable. And below her signature was a counter-signature: Arthur Henderson. My heart stopped. Grandpa had signed me out? I zoomed in on the signature. Arthur Henderson. The A was sharp. The loop was tight. The ink was heavy at the turning points. It was a forgery. My mother hadn't just stolen money. She had stolen my birthright. She had drafted a legal document claiming I was mentally unstable, creating a paper trail of lies about my sanity, and then forged my grandfather's signature to cut me out of the future entirely. I sat back in my chair, the glow of the screen illuminating the dark kitchen. The tears didn't come this time. The nausea faded. In its place, a cold, hard clarity settled over me, like iron cooling in a mold. They weren't my family. They were parasites, and they had picked the wrong host. I looked at the date on the amendment. October 14th, 2019. I remembered that date. That was the week I had been in the hospital with pneumonia. Mom had visited me once, for 10 minutes, to tell me I looked terrible. She had been so worried. She had been busy erasing me. I closed the laptop. I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to settle for peace. I was going to burn the whole thing down. And I was going to use their own matches to do it. The next morning, the sky was the color of a bruise, low and heavy with impending rain. I drove back to Marcus Gwen's office, my car feeling less like a Honda Civic and more like a getaway vehicle. This time, Marcus wasn't alone. Sitting in the visitor's chair was a woman who looked like she could be a librarian or a sniper, depending on the lighting. She wore a gray cardigan and rectangular glasses, and her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. "Stella, this is Elena Vance," Marcus said. "She's an estate litigator. She doesn't do the flashy courtroom theatrics. She handles the paperwork warfare." Elena stood and shook my hand. Her grip was firm, dry, and brief. Marcus showed me the scans. Elena said, her voice was low and precise, "The amendment removing you as a beneficiary? If that signature is indeed forged, we are looking at fraud. But digital scans aren't enough. Why not?" I asked, sitting down. "Because in court, scans can be challenged," she explained. "They can claim the file was altered. They can claim it was a draft that was never executed. We need the wet ink. We need the original document, or at least a certified copy filed with the trust administrator, and we need to establish a chain of custody." She pointed to the USB drive sitting on Marcus's desk. "This is a good start," she continued. "It gives us a map. But if we file a petition based on this alone, your mother's lawyers, who are undoubtedly expensive and aggressive, will bury us in motions. They will argue that your grandfather was mentally incompetent when he scanned these, or that you manipulated the files. We need more." Marcus turned his screen around. "And we need to talk about the money flow," he said. He pulled up a spreadsheet. It was a spiderweb of lines connecting boxes. "I spent the night tracing the vendor payments." He said, "There is a pattern. Small amounts, 3,000 here, 5,000 there, consistently, every month, for 7 years. He pointed to a box labeled Global Logistics Solutions. This company has received over $400,000 in the last 5 years. He said, "And what do they do?" I asked. "Nothing," Marcus said flatly. "I ran their address. It's a UPS store in a strip mall in Nevada." I stared at the screen. $400,000. That was my student loans paid off 10 times over. That was a house. That was a life. "And there is something else," Marcus said, his voice softer. He clicked on another tab. "I found a corresponding set of deposits into the business account. They are personal checks from your grandfather." "From Grandpa?" I asked. "Yes. Look at the dates." He pointed. March 12th, 2018. Check to Global Logistics for $4,500. March 15th, 2018. Deposit from Arthur Henderson, personal for $4,500. "I don't understand." I said, "He was covering their tracks." Marcus said, "He saw the money going out. He knew the business would bounce checks if he didn't replenish the funds. So he was paying their theft out of his own pocket to keep the company solvent." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. He was protecting them. I whispered, even while they were stealing from him, or he was protecting the reputation. Elena added, "If the business failed, the Henderson name would be mud in this town." He was buying silence, but he stopped. I said, realizing it, "The check stopped." "Yes," Marcus said, "about 6 months before he died. The personal deposit stopped. That's when the business account started to go into the red. That's likely when he decided to set up the contingency for you. He stopped bailing them out and started building your life raft." Elena looked at me. "Stella, you need to find the originals. If he scanned that amendment, the physical paper is somewhere. If we have that, we have a smoking gun." I didn't go straight to the house. I needed to test the waters. I needed to see if Eleanor would lie to my face when confronted with a direct question. I knew she would, of course, but I needed to witness it. It was part of the deprogramming. I called her. She answered on the first ring. "I thought you were done talking to me," she said. Her voice was tight, clipped. "I have a question." "Mom," I said, "make it quick. I am meeting the caterer for the wake." "Was there ever a trust for me?" I asked. "Specifically for me, or was I ever a named beneficiary on the main trust?" There was a pause, a beat of silence where I could hear the gears grinding. Then, she laughed. It was a brittle, high-pitched sound. "Oh, Stella, you are being paranoid. Who have you been talking to? That little friend of yours? Maya? I am asking you a question." "Mom." "No," she snapped. "There was never a specific trust for you. Your grandfather believed in fairness. He left everything to the family pot, to be managed by those with experience. He knew you would just, well, look at you now. You get $20,000 and you suddenly think you are a forensic accountant. So I was never a beneficiary?" "No," she yelled. "And stop asking. You are going to tear this family apart with your greed. Stella, do you hear me? You are ruining his memory." I hung up. She lied. She didn't just evade. She constructed a reality where I was the villain for asking. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my apartment complex. I felt a strange calm. It was the calm of confirmation. There was no going back. I walked up to my apartment as I turned the key in the lock. The door opened from the inside. I froze. My brother, Kyle, was sitting on my couch. He had a beer in his hand, my beer, from the 6-pack I bought for when Maya came over. "How did you get in?" I asked, my voice steady. "Mom has a spare key," he said, shrugging. "You really should upgrade your security. Stell, anyone could break in here." "Get out," I said. "Whoa, relax," he said, standing up. He was wearing a polo shirt that was too tight around the biceps. A calculated display of strength. "I just came to check on you. Mom is worried. She says you're spiraling. I'm fine. Kyle, get out." He took a step toward me. He didn't look aggressive. Exactly. He looked like he was trying to be the big brother, the protector. "Look," he said, putting the beer down on my coffee table without a coaster. "We know about the box. We know you found some old papers. Mom is freaking out, thinking you're going to try to sue us or something crazy. I'm not trying to sue anyone. I said, I just want what is mine. What is yours? He laughed. The 20 grand? Fine, keep it. Buy a new car. But don't go digging into the business. Stella, you don't understand how it works. It's complex. There are flows, leverage, things you don't have the head for. I understand what a shell company is. Kyle, I said, I understand what Global Logistics Solutions is. Kyle's face changed. The smirk vanished. His eyes went flat. You have been busy, he said softly. He took another step. He was in my personal space now. I could smell his cologne, expensive and overpowering. Here is the thing. Stella, you are emotional. You always have been. You cry at commercials. You can't handle the pressure of real finance. If you try to bring this stuff up, you're just going to look stupid, and you're going to hurt Mom. He reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. It was heavy. Why don't you let me hold on to that $20,000 for you? He suggested. I can put it in a high-yield account. Double it in 6 months. You know I'm good with money. You're good with spending money, I said, not making it. His grip tightened. Not enough to bruise, but enough to warn. Don't be a bitch. Stella, I'm offering you a way out. No, I said. It was a simple word. 1 syllable. But it felt like a gunshot in the small room. I looked him in the eye. No, I am not giving you the money. I am not giving you the papers. And I am not going to be quiet. Now, get out of my apartment before I call the police. Kyle stared at me. He looked genuinely shocked. He had never heard me say no. Not really. I was Stella the doormat. Stella the echo. You wouldn't dare. He said, try me. I said. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and held it up. My thumb was over the emergency call button. He looked at the phone, then at me. His face flushed a deep, ugly red. You are making a huge mistake, he spat. You are going to end up with nothing. No family. No money. Nothing. He shoved past me, his shoulder slamming into mine hard enough to make me stumble. He stormed out the door. Leaving it wide open, I walked over and slammed it shut. I locked the deadbolt. I put the chain on. I leaned against the door. My legs finally giving way. I slid down to the floor. I was shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I had done it. I had stood up to him, and the world hadn't ended. I needed the originals, the house, grandfather's house. Mom and Kyle had been cleaning it out for weeks, which I now realized meant sanitizing the crime scene. But if grandfather was smart enough to hide a key in a contingency envelope, he was smart enough to hide the smoking gun somewhere they wouldn't look. I waited until I knew where they were. Kyle had posted a photo on Instagram of himself at a driving range 20 minutes ago. Mom had said she was meeting the caterer. I drove to the old Victorian house on Elm Street. I still had my key, unless they had changed the locks. I parked down the street, hidden by a large oak tree. I walked up the driveway. The house looked tired. The garden was overgrown. I tried my key in the front door. It turned. I stepped inside. The air was stale, smelling of dust and the lavender potpourri Mom insisted on using. The house was half empty. Furniture was covered in sheets. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. I moved quickly. The study. That was where he kept everything. I walked into the study. The desk was clear. The drawers were empty. The filing cabinets were open and bare. I checked the bookshelves. He used to hide cash in the encyclopedias. I pulled out volume A to C. Nothing. Volume M to P. Nothing. I heard a noise. A car door slamming. I froze. I went to the window and peeked through the blinds. Mom's Range Rover was in the driveway. Panic flared. I was trapped. I heard the front key turn. I looked around. The kitchen. There was a back door in the kitchen. I slipped out of the study and into the hallway, moving as quietly as I could. I ducked into the kitchen just as the front door opened. Stella? Mom's voice called out. Is that your car down the street? She knew. Of course she knew. I didn't answer. I stood in the kitchen, near the island. I heard her footsteps coming down the hall. She walked into the kitchen. She stopped when she saw me. She wasn't dressed for a caterer meeting. She was wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, and she was holding a stack of papers. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice was breathless. "I came to say goodbye to the house," I said. "Before you sell it, don't lie to me," she said. "You came to snoop." She walked over to the counter. There was a small, portable shredder sitting there. I hadn't noticed it before. I watched as she fed the papers she was holding into the machine. The whirring sound was loud in the quiet kitchen. "What are you destroying?" "Mom?" I asked. "Junk mail," she said, not looking at me. "Old bills. Nothing that concerns you." I looked at the shredder bin. It was full of cross-cut confetti. I looked at the stack of papers still in her hand. The top one had a header. Henderson Family Trust, Amendment. It was the original. She was shredding the evidence. My instinct was to lunge, to grab the papers, to scream. But Mr. Clark's voice echoed in my head. "They will say you are unstable." If I fought her for the papers, she would call the police. She would say I attacked her. It would be my word against hers. And she was the grieving daughter of a pillar of the community, and I was the emotional girl who needed medication. I took a breath. I pulled out my phone. I held it up and took a picture. "What are you doing?" she snapped, covering the papers with her hand. "Documenting," I said calmly. I took another picture, this time of the shredder, then of the pile of confetti. "You can't use that," she said. "It proves nothing. It proves you are destroying documents during a probate period." I said, "Elena Vance says that is a felony. Spoliation of evidence." She flinched at the name. She knew who Elena Vance was. Everyone in the legal community did. "You hired Vance?" she whispered. "I didn't hire anyone." I said, "I am just consulting." I took a step back. "You can shred them." "Mom," I said, "go ahead. But the forensic team can reconstruct shredded documents. It takes time, and it costs a fortune. But they can do it. And when they do, and the judge sees that you try to destroy them, well, I think that looks worse than the forgery itself." She stared at me. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. She looked terrified. Not angry, terrified. I had flipped the board. She was the one scrambling now. I turned and walked toward the back door. "Where are you going?" she called after me. Her voice cracked. "Home," I said. "I have seen enough." I walked out the back door and into the overgrown garden. My legs felt like jelly, but I kept my head high until I was around the corner and in my car. I locked the doors and slumped over the steering wheel. She had the original, and she had probably shredded it the moment I left the room. But I had the photo. I had the photo of her holding it, standing next to a shredder. It wasn't the document itself, but it was powerful. I started the car. As I pulled away, I glanced at the passenger seat where I had tossed my purse. Something was sticking out of my old photo album, the one I had grabbed from a box in the hallway on my way to the kitchen. I hadn't even realized I'd taken it. It was reflex, one of the few things that was undeniably mine. I pulled over again. I opened the album. It was photos of me as a kid, me on a swing, me holding a cat, me with Grandpa. I turned the page. There was a photo of me and Grandpa sitting on the porch of the lake house we used to rent. I was maybe 10. We were laughing. Stuck to the back of the photo, barely visible, was a small yellow Post-it note. I peeled it off. It had a 4-digit code written on it, 1984, and a phrase, "Check the cedar chest." I stared at it. The cedar chest. It was an old, beat-up wooden chest that had been in my bedroom since I was a teenager. Grandpa had given it to me when I moved into my first apartment. He said every woman needed a place to keep her private treasures. I used it to store winter blankets and old sweaters. I had dragged it with me to 3 different apartments. It was sitting at the foot of my bed right now. I merged back into traffic, driving faster now. 1984. That was the year Orwell wrote about surveillance and control. Or maybe it was just a date. I got home. I ran up the stairs. I pushed the pile of laundry off the cedar chest. It didn't have a digital lock. It had a simple keyhole, but the lock was busted. It had never worked. I opened the lid. Blankets, sweaters, an old scarf. I started pulling things out. Nothing, just fabric. I felt the bottom. It was solid wood. I tapped it. It sounded hollow. Check the cedar chest. I looked at the code again. 1984. Where would I put a code on a wooden chest? I examined the outside. Nothing. I examined the inside. In the corner, near the hinge, there was a small metal plate with the maker's mark. Lane Furniture. I pushed on the plate. It didn't move. I looked closer. There were 4 small screws holding the plate. I ran to the kitchen and grabbed a screwdriver. I unscrewed the plate. Behind it was a small, recessed compartment, and inside that compartment was a tiny combination lockbox, the kind you use for spare keys. I spun the dials. 1984. The box popped open. Inside was a single, thick envelope. It was labeled in Grandpa's handwriting. The ink slightly faded. If they try to make you feel crazy, read this first. I sat on the floor, surrounded by my winter clothes. He knew. He knew they would gaslight me. He knew they would tell me I was paranoid, emotional, unstable. He had planted this years ago, waiting for the moment I was strong enough to find it. I tore open the envelope. Inside wasn't a legal document. It was a journal, a small black notebook. I opened the first page. January 4th, 2015. Eleanor came to me today asking for $20,000 for medical bills for Stella. She said Stella was in trouble. I called Stella. She was at work. Fine. Eleanor is lying to get cash. I confronted her. She cried. She said I didn't love her. February 20th, 2016. Found Kyle trying to access my online banking. He said he was helping me with updates. I changed the passwords. July 10th, 2018. I am afraid. They are talking about putting me in a home. They say I'm forgetting things, but I'm not forgetting. I'm remembering too much. That is the problem. I flipped through the pages. It was a log, a detailed, dated log of every manipulation, every lie, every theft, and then, tucked into the back pocket of the journal, I found it, a folded document on thick, ivory paper. Declaration of Trust. It was the original, not the amendment removing me. The original trust document, creating a separate, irrevocable trust for Stella Henderson, funded with 20% of the company shares and the assets in the Sparrow Ledger. And there was a note clipped to it. I signed this before the amendment. The amendment they forced me to sign was under duress. This is the true will. This is the shield. I held the paper to my chest. I rocked back and forth, a sob breaking loose from my throat. I had it. I had the truth. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't greedy. I wasn't paranoid. I was the heir. And tomorrow, I was going to introduce my family to the real Stella Henderson. The floor of my bedroom was cold, but I didn't move. I sat cross-legged amidst the scattered contents of the cedar chest, the small black notebook open in my lap. The handwriting was shaky in places, the ink changing color from blue to black as the pens ran dry over the years, but the voice was unmistakably his. It was grandfather's voice, stripped of the polite fiction he had maintained at Sunday dinners. I read the entry dated June 12, 2018. Eleanor came by today. She was crying. She said the roof on her house needed replacing and she didn't have the liquidity. I wrote her a check for $15,000. 2 days later, I saw the contractor's van at her house, but I called the company. They said the job was billed at $6,000. The rest is gone. When I asked her, she told me I was confused. She said I authorized the extra for unforeseen structural damage. I never did. She looked me in the eye and told me my memory was going. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the draft. I turned the page, my fingers numb. September 4th, 2019. I tried to finalize the paperwork to give Stella 20% of the holding company. I sent the draft to the lawyer. When it came back for signing, the percentage was gone. It had been changed to a discretionary stipend, controlled by the primary trustee, Eleanor. I asked how this happened. Eleanor said she spoke to the lawyer to clarify my intentions. She said giving Stella ownership would put a target on her back. She said Kyle would be jealous. She said she was protecting Stella. I signed the alteration because I was too tired to fight them both in that room. I am a coward. I lowered the book. He hadn't cut me out because he didn't trust me. He had allowed them to cut me out because he was afraid of what they would do to me if he didn't. She said she was protecting Stella. That phrase again. It was the family weapon. They used protection, like a silencer on a gun. I picked up the other document from the chest, the original declaration of trust he had hidden. This was the one he had signed before the manipulation. It was clean, it was legal, and it gave me 20% of everything. I wasn't just fighting for $20,000 anymore. I was fighting for a fifth of a company that, according to Marcus Gwen, had generated millions in revenue over the last decade, even if they had bled it dry. The assets, the land, the equipment, the licenses, were worth a fortune. I slept with the notebook under my pillow. I put a chair under the doorknob. The next morning, I met Marcus and Elena Vance at a diner 3 towns over. Elena insisted on the location. Too many eyes near the office. She had said, I slid the notebook and the original trust document across the Formica table. Elena put on her glasses. She read in silence while Marcus drank his coffee. When she looked up, her expression was terrifyingly calm. This changes the landscape, Elena said. This isn't just a probate dispute. Stella, this is evidence of a conspiracy to defraud. The notebook corroborates the pattern Marcus found in the financials. The hidden trust document proves intent. What do we do? I asked. Do we go to the police? Not yet, Elena said. If we go to criminal authorities now, the assets get frozen by the state. The investigation could take years. The business would likely collapse, and you would end up with 20% of zero. So what is the plan? We squeeze, Marcus said. We file a formal demand for accounting. We notify the bank holding the business accounts that there is a dispute regarding authorized signatories. That will freeze the accounts immediately. No more transfers to shell companies. No more withdrawals by your mother or brother. It will suffocate them. I said, exactly, Elena said. They rely on that cash flow to maintain their lifestyle. When the tap runs dry, they will panic. And when people panic, they make mistakes. We file a petition to enforce this original trust. We force them to mediation. We make them an offer. They admit the validity of this document, or we expose the fraud in open court. I looked at the coffee cup in my hands. They will destroy me, I said. They will tell everyone I'm crazy. They have already started. Elena reached across the table and tapped the notebook. Let them talk, she said. We have the receipts, literally. I didn't have to wait long for the counterattack. 2 days later, on a Tuesday evening, I was home from work. I had just fed my cat and was sitting on the couch, trying to read a book, when there was a knock at the door. It wasn't the aggressive pounding of my brother. It was a gentle, rhythmic rap. I looked through the peephole. It was Mom. And standing behind her was my Aunt Sarah, her younger sister, and my cousin Beth. Aunt Sarah was the nice one, the peacemaker, the one who sent cards on minor holidays. I debated not opening the door, but I knew if I didn't. They would call the landlord. They would call the police for a wellness check. They would escalate. I opened the voice recorder app on my phone and slipped it into the front pocket of my hoodie. I opened the door. Stella, sweetheart, Mom said. Her voice was trembling. We were so worried. You haven't answered any texts for 2 days. Can we come in? Aunt Sarah asked gently. We just want to talk. I stepped back. Come in, I said. They filed into my small living room. Mom looked around with a critical eye, noting the dust, the clutter. Cousin Beth looked uncomfortable, clutching her purse like a shield. We brought you some soup, Mom said, placing a Tupperware container on the table. Chicken noodle. I know you forget to eat when you get like this. Like what? I asked, leaning against the kitchen counter. I kept my distance. When you get manic, Mom said softly. I am not manic. Mom. Stella. Listen to your mother, Aunt Sarah said. She loves you. We all love you. We are hearing some very concerning things. Like what? I repeated. That you are harassing the estate attorney, Mom said, her eyes wide and wet with unshed tears. That you are breaking into banks. That you are paranoid about some conspiracy. Stella, honey, this is grief. It happens. When Daddy died, I thought I saw him in the grocery store for months. The mind plays tricks. I felt the anger rising, hot and sharp, but I pushed it down. I needed them to talk. I'm not seeing ghosts. I said, I saw checks. I saw signatures that didn't match. Mom sighed. A tragic, heavy sound. See? She said to Aunt Sarah. She is fixating. It's the stress. She has always been fragile. Remember when she dropped out of ballet? She couldn't handle the pressure. I was 12. I said, and I quit because I tore a ligament. You quit because you were weak. Mom said, and that is okay. We are here to help you. We want you to come stay with me for a while. Just a few weeks. We can get you some help. Doctor, Evans has an opening. He can prescribe something to help you sleep. To stop the racing thoughts. I touched the phone in my pocket. You want to medicate me? I asked. We want to stabilize you, Mom corrected. And what about the $20,000? I asked. Mom waved her hand dismissively. Forget the money. We will handle the money. You just need to sign a power of attorney, just temporary, so I can manage your affairs while you get better. There it was. The endgame. Power of attorney. If I signed that, she could legally undo everything I had done. She could close the safety deposit box. She could withdraw the mediation request. She could burn the trust document. I looked at Aunt Sarah. Do you think I'm crazy? Aunt Sarah? I asked. Sarah looked down at her shoes. I think you are under a lot of strain. Stella. And Eleanor is just trying to protect the family. Protect the family, I said, or protect the lies. Stella. Mom snapped. The mask slipped for a fraction of a second. Stop this nonsense. You are embarrassing yourself. You are embarrassing us. I am not going anywhere with you. I said clearly, I am not signing anything. And I am not manic. I have hired an attorney. If you want to talk to me, you can talk to Elena Vance. Mom's face went white. You hired Vance? She whispered. With what money? With the money Grandpa gave me. I said, the money you said was a prop. Mom stood up. Her hands were shaking. You are making a mistake. Stella, you are declaring war on your own flesh and blood. You started the war. Mom, I said, when you stole my inheritance. She stared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a look I would never forget. It was the look of a predator who realizes the prey has teeth. Let's go, she said to the others. She is too far gone. We will have to handle this legally. She marched out. Beth followed, looking terrified. Aunt Sarah lingered in the doorway. Sarah? Mom called from the hall. I'm coming, Sarah said. She looked at me. Her eyes were sad. I'm sorry. Stella, she whispered. I looked at her. You know, don't you? I asked. You know she forges his name. Sarah flinched. She looked toward the hallway, then stepped closer to me, lowering her voice to a breath. I saw her do it once. She whispered, years ago. It was a permission slip for your school trip to Europe. Dad was out of town. You really wanted to go. Eleanor didn't want to wait for him to fax the signature. She just signed it. She laughed and said it was easier than explaining it to him. My stomach turned. It wasn't just money. It was everything. Convenience. Control. Don't do this. Stella. Sarah pleaded. She will destroy you. She knows people. She knows how to twist things. Please, just apologize. Just let it go. I can't. I said, then God help you. Sarah said. She turned and walked away. I closed the door and locked it. I pulled the phone out of my pocket. I stopped the recording. I had it. You quit because you were weak. Just sign a power of attorney. She is too far gone. They were building a case for competency. They were going to try to have me declared incompetent so they could annul the trust. But Aunt Sarah's whisper, I saw her do it once. It wasn't on the recording. She had been too quiet. But I knew. The next day, the bureaucratic machinery started to turn. I received an email notification from the trust administration firm, the one that handled the official family trust, not the secret sparrow one. Subject: confirmation of address change request. Dear Ms. Henderson, we have received your request to update your mailing address to PMO, Box 404 Westbury. Please click here to confirm. I stared at the screen. Westbury, that was where the shell companies were. That was where Mom's consultants had their mailboxes. She was trying to divert my mail. She was trying to intercept the legal notices that Marcus and Elena were sending. It was happening now. Not 5 years ago. Now. I clicked deny. Then I called the firm. This is Stella Henderson. I told the clerk. I did not request an address change. Someone is impersonating me. I need to place a fraud alert on my file, and I want to know who submitted the request. It was submitted via fax, the clerk said, from a number ending in 4400. I knew that number. It was the fax machine in the home office at the big house. She wasn't even being careful anymore. She was desperate. I hung up and called Elena. They tried to change my address. I said, good. Elena said, good? It leaves a trail. Stella, fax logs, timestamps. It proves ongoing interference. We add it to the pile. But there was more. An hour later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Area code 212, New York. Miss Henderson? A man's voice asked. Yes, this is James Whitman from Titan Capital. I am calling regarding the loan application for Henderson Development. I frowned. I didn't apply for a loan. I said, no. The applicant is Kyle Henderson. The man said, but your name appears on the collateral documents as a 20% stakeholder. We need your signature to finalize the lien on the property. I froze. Kyle was trying to take out a loan against the company, and he had listed the company assets as collateral, but he couldn't do that without the consent of all shareholders. He listed me? I asked. Yes, the man said. Well, actually, he submitted a waiver claiming you were a silent partner with no voting rights. But our compliance department flagged it. Given the size of the loan, $2 million, we require all beneficial owners to sign off. $2 million. They were trying to cash out. They knew the walls were closing in. So they were trying to leverage the company for one last massive payday before I could freeze the assets. Mr. Whitman, I said, keeping my voice steady, I did not agree to this loan. In fact, I am currently in litigation regarding the ownership of Henderson Development. Any document you have claiming I waived my rights is likely forged. There was a long silence on the line. I see. Mr. Whitman said. His tone shifted from salesman to risk manager. Thank you for that information. Miss Henderson, we will suspend the application pending review. He hung up. My heart was hammering. They were looting the ship. They were trying to sink it and swim away with the gold before I could get on board. And the fact that the bank had my name as a 20% stakeholder, that meant the original trust document, the one Grandpa signed before the forgery, was somewhere in the system. Maybe an old filing. Maybe a digital footprint they hadn't managed to scrub. Kyle had accidentally validated my claim by trying to steal around it. I sat at my kitchen table. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, aching grief. I looked at the empty chair across from me. I imagined Mom sitting there, not the monster she had become, but the mother I had wanted her to be. The one who brought me soup because she loved me, not because she wanted to sedate me. I imagined Kyle, my big brother, the one who taught me how to ride a bike, before the money, before the expectations, before the corruption. I realized then that I wasn't fighting to save my family. My family was already gone. It had been replaced by a corporation of lies. I was fighting for the memory of the one person who had actually loved me. I was fighting for Arthur Henderson. And I was fighting for Stella. I picked up my phone. I dialed Elena. File it. I said, Are you sure? Elena asked. Once we file the petition for mediation and the fraud alert with the business bank, it becomes public record. It will be in the court docket. The town will know. I don't care. I said, File it. It's done. She said. I didn't sleep that night. I waited. The next morning, at 9 a.m., the notifications started. First, an email from the court system confirming the filing of Henderson versus Henderson et al. Then, a text from Maya. OMG. Did you see the legal blotter? You go, girl. And then, at 10:15 a.m., the text I had been dreading, from Mom. It was just one sentence, no emojis, no sweetheart, no guilt trip about soup. If you do this, you won't have a family. I stared at the words. It was the final threat, the ultimate leverage, the thing that had kept me in line for 33 years, the fear of being an orphan, the fear of being alone. I looked around my apartment. It was small, it was messy, but it was mine. I had $20,000 in the bank. I had a truthful lawyer. I had a best friend. I had a cat. And I had a grandfather who had loved me enough to build a safety net from the grave. I wasn't alone. I typed my reply. My fingers were steady. I know. I hit send. Then I blocked the number. I put the phone down and walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The sky was still gray, but there was a break in the clouds, a sliver of pale, clean light hitting the pavement. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like ozone and wet asphalt. It tasted like the truth. The fluorescent lights in the hallway of the county administration building buzzed with a sound like trapped flies. It was a low, electric drone that seemed to vibrate right against my temples. I sat on a hard wooden bench that had been polished by decades of nervous people waiting for judgments, divorces, and tax hearings. This wasn't a courtroom with mahogany rails and a high bench. It was a mediation room in the civil division, a modest, beige space that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. The banality of it made everything feel sharper. If we were in a movie, there would be dramatic shadows and swelling music. Here, there was just a water cooler that gurgled periodically and a receptionist chewing gum behind a glass partition. I smoothed the skirt of my suit. It was the only suit I owned, bought on sale for job interviews 3 years ago. Next to me, Elena Vance looked like a weapon sheathed in gray wool. She was typing on her phone, her thumbs moving with lethal precision. Marcus Gwen sat on my other side, a thick accordion folder resting on his knees. He looked calm, like a man who found comfort in the absolute binary of numbers. "They are here," Marcus said softly. I looked up. The elevator doors at the end of the hall slid open. Eleanor and Kyle stepped out. My mother was performing dignity. She wore a cream-colored suit that screamed old money, a string of pearls, and oversized sunglasses that she removed slowly as she scanned the hallway. She held her head high, her chin tilted up, projecting the air of a woman who had accidentally wandered into a place beneath her station and was graciously tolerating the smell. Kyle walked a half-step behind her. He was wearing a navy blazer with gold buttons. He saw me and smirked, a tight, dismissive curling of his lip. It was the look he used to give me when I asked to play video games with him and his friends. "Go away, Stella. The grown-ups are talking." They walked past us without a word. The air chilled as they passed. Eleanor's perfume, Chanel and something sharp, lingered in their wake. They entered the mediation room. "Ready?" Elena asked, slipping her phone into her pocket. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my spine felt like steel. "Ready," I said. The room was small. A long rectangular table took up most of the space. We sat on one side. They sat on the other. At the head of the table sat Mr. Prentice, the court-appointed mediator. He was a weary-looking man with a comb-over and a tie that was slightly too wide. "Mr. Prentice shuffled a stack of papers. "We are here regarding the petition filed by Stella Henderson concerning the Arthur Henderson estate and the alleged mismanagement of the Henderson Family Trust," he said. His voice was a drone, matching the lights. He looked over his reading glasses. "Now, I understand there is a great deal of acrimony here. My job is to see if we can reach a stipulation before this goes to a full probate judge, which would be expensive and public for everyone involved." Eleanor folded her hands on the table. Her manicure was flawless. "Mr. Prentice," she began, her voice smooth and reasonable, "this is all a terrible misunderstanding. My daughter is grieving. She has been under a great deal of stress, and I believe she has been misled by opportunistic counsel." She glanced at Elena with a pitying smile. We are happy to reimburse the estate for any minor clerical errors that may have occurred during my father's illness. Eleanor continued. But these accusations of fraud? They are simply the fantasies of a confused young woman. Kyle leaned back, crossing his arms. She's broke. Kyle added, she's just looking for a payout. Mr. Prentice looked at Elena. Mrs. Vance? Elena didn't smile. She didn't posture. She simply opened her file. We are not here for a payout, Mr. Prentice, Elena said. We are here for an accounting, and we are here to enforce the original will of Arthur Henderson. She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was a photocopy of the check. Exhibit A, Elena said. A check for $20,000, drawn on the account of the Sparrow Ledger. Eleanor sighed. A prop, she said. A joke he played. The account was dormant. Elena slid another document across. Exhibit B, she said. The bank transfer record. The check cleared. The account was not dormant. It held a balance of exactly $20,000, deposited by Arthur Henderson 3 days before he died. She looked at Eleanor. If it was a prop, Mrs. Gable, why did you attempt to intercept it? Why did you tell your daughter it was fake? Why did you attempt to coerce her into transferring the funds to you? I was protecting her, Eleanor snapped. I didn't want her to get in trouble with the bank. Elena ignored the outburst. She signaled to Marcus. Marcus opened his folder. He didn't slide papers. He laid out a spreadsheet. It was color-coded. We have conducted a preliminary forensic audit of the Henderson development accounts, relying on the parallel ledgers kept by the deceased. Marcus said. His voice was dry, factual. He pointed to a red line. Over the last 7 years, $1.2 million has been transferred from the business operating account to 3 entities: Global Logistics Solutions, KTH, Consulting, and Gable Interiors. Kyle shifted in his seat. So? Kyle said. We have vendors. That's how business works. Marcus pulled out a stack of photos. This is the registered address for Global Logistics, Marcus said. It is a mailbox in a UPS store in Nevada. This is the address for KOH Consulting. It is a residential apartment listed in the name of Kyle Henderson's college roommate. And Gable Interiors? That is registered to a P.O. box that bills directly to your personal credit card. Mrs. Gable. The room went silent. The hum of the lights seemed to get louder. Mr. Prentice picked up the photos. He frowned. These entities provided no services. Marcus continued. The invoices were generated on the same day the transfers were made. This is not business. This is embezzlement. Eleanor's face had gone rigid. The polite mask was cracking. My father knew about these transfers, she insisted. He authorized them. He wanted us to have the money. Elena pulled out the next document, the heavy artillery, the letter from the cedar chest, the list of dates, the notes about the missing roof money. This is a journal kept by Arthur Henderson. Elena said, in his own hand. He details the theft. He details the coercion. He details how you forced him to sign checks by threatening to put him in a home. Lies. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. It was a violent, sudden sound. That old man was senile. He didn't know what day of the week it was. You are twisting the ramblings of a dementia patient. Mr. Prentice looked at Eleanor. His expression had shifted from bored to alert. Mrs. Gable, please lower your voice, he said. Elena wasn't done. We also have evidence of spoliation, she said. She slid the photo of Eleanor standing by the shredder across the table. The photo I had taken in the kitchen. This was taken 3 days ago. Elena said, Mrs. Gable was observed destroying documents related to the estate. That is a felony. Kyle looked at the photo, then at his mother. He looked pale. Mom, you said you handled that, he whispered. Shut up. Eleanor hissed at him. She turned her venom on me. You little spy. She spat. You crept into my house? It was Grandpa's house, I said. My voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. Mr. Prentice cleared his throat. This is substantial, he said. If these allegations are true, we are looking at criminal liability. Not just civil, but we aren't done, Elena said. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out the final document, the one I had found in the secret compartment of the cedar chest, the original Declaration of Trust. She placed it in the center of the table. Arthur Henderson anticipated that his original wishes would be subverted. Elena said, he anticipated the forgery of the amendment removing Stella. So he created a failsafe. She pointed to a clause on the third page. Clause 4.2. The contingency. In the event that the beneficiary Stella Henderson successfully claims and deposits the specific monetary gift of $20,000 referenced in the letter of intent, this trust shall immediately vest 20% of the total shares of Henderson Development and all real property holdings to said beneficiary. Elena looked at Eleanor. The $20,000 wasn't just a gift. She said, it was a key. It was the activation signal for the real inheritance. By depositing that check, Stella triggered this document. It supersedes the forged amendment. It supersedes everything. The room was absolutely still. I watched my mother's face. I watched the realization wash over her. She had tried to stop me from depositing the check, not just because she wanted the cash, but because somewhere, deep down, she knew. She knew he had set a trap, and she had walked right into it by trying to stop me. If she had just let me have the money, maybe she could have fought the trust, but her own interference, the text messages, the threats, the protection, proved she was acting in bad faith. She stared at the document, then she looked at me. Her eyes were black holes. There was no warmth, no motherly recognition, just a cold, terrifying calculation. You don't deserve it, she said. The words hung in the air. Excuse me? Mister? Prentice said. You don't deserve it, she shouted. She stood up, knocking her chair back. It clattered against the wall. I raised you, she screamed, pointing a manicured finger at my face. I fed you. I clothed you. I put a roof over your head. Do you know how much you cost me? Do you know what I sacrificed? I sat perfectly still. I sacrificed my life, she yelled. I could have been anything, but I was stuck with you, and your father died, and I was left with the mess. And now you think you can just walk in here and take what is mine? Because you were the nice one? Because you visited him and read him books? She leaned over the table. Her face twisted into a snarl. Love isn't free. Stella, you owe me. You owe me for every meal you ate. You owe me for every pair of shoes. You are in debt to me. You don't get to take the company just because the old man liked you better. I earned it. I suffered for it. Kyle reached out and grabbed her arm. Mom, stop, he said. Mom, sit down. Don't touch me. She swatted him away. She stared at me, breathing hard. You are a thief, she whispered. You are stealing my life. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, I had thought her behavior was about high standards, about wanting me to be better, but it wasn't. It was about the ledger. In her mind, I wasn't a daughter, I was an expense. I was a red line on her balance sheet, and she was furious that she hadn't gotten a return on her investment. I didn't owe her. Children don't owe their parents for their existence. I stood up slowly. I don't owe you anything. Mom, I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Prentice stood up. He looked shaken. I think we have heard enough, he said. His voice was firm now. Given the evidence presented, and the outburst, I am recommending an immediate freeze on all estate assets. I am ordering a forensic accounting by an independent third party. And I am referring the allegations of forgery and spoliation to the district attorney's office for review. Eleanor blinked. The reality of his words hit her. District attorney? She whispered. Mrs. Gable, I suggest you retain criminal counsel. Mr. Prentice said. This mediation is concluded. We walked out of the room. The hallway was full of people now. My Aunt Sarah was there. Cousin Beth. A few other cousins I hadn't seen in years. They had been waiting for news, hovering like vultures. They looked at us as we exited. They looked at Eleanor, flushed and disheveled, her perfect hair coming undone. They looked at Kyle, who was pale and staring at the floor, and they looked at me. Usually, they would rush to Eleanor. They would coo and comfort her. Oh, poor Eleanor. Is Stella causing trouble again? But nobody moved. They had heard the shouting through the thin walls. They had heard I sacrificed my life. They had heard the ugliness. And they saw the way Mr. Prentice was looking at her, like she was dangerous. Eleanor walked into the hallway. She looked around, expecting her court to assemble. "Sarah?" she said. Aunt Sarah stood by the water cooler. She looked at her sister, then she looked at me. She took a half step toward me. Eleanor froze. "Sarah?" Eleanor repeated, her voice rising in panic. Sarah didn't go to her. She just shook her head. A small, sad movement. She turned and walked toward the elevator. One by one. The others followed. They avoided Eleanor's gaze. They looked at their phones. They looked at their shoes. The spell was broken. The queen was naked, and she was ugly. Eleanor stood there, alone in the fluorescent corridor. Kyle lingered for a second, then muttered, "I have to call my lawyer," and walked away from her, pulling out his cell phone. She was completely alone. She looked at me one last time. There was no anger left, just fear, a vast, hollow fear. I turned my back on her. "Let's go," I said to Elena. We walked out of the building and into the afternoon sun. The light was blinding after the dim beige of the mediation room. The air smelled of rain and exhaust. But to me, it smelled like oxygen. "We did it," Marcus said. He sounded surprised. "We started it," Elena corrected. "This is going to be a long fight. Stella, they will appeal. They will delay. The criminal investigation will take months. I know." I said, "But you have the leverage now." She said, "You are the plaintiff. You control the narrative." I nodded. I walked to my car. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. New voicemail. It was from a number I didn't recognize. No caller ID. I pressed play and held the phone to my ear. There was a crackle of static. Then, a voice. It was an old man's voice, but not Grandpa's. It was deeper, rougher. "Miss Henderson, you don't know me. I was a friend of Arthur's. We played chess on Tuesdays. He told me what he did. He told me he was worried you wouldn't find the courage. He made me promise to call you if the truth ever came out." There was a pause, the sound of a breath. "He said to tell you that he wasn't protecting you from the world. He was saving you for it. He'd be proud. Kid, good move." Click, the message ended. I stood there in the parking lot, the phone pressed to my cheek. Tears pricked my eyes. But they didn't fall. Good move. I looked back at the county building, through the glass doors. I could see the silhouette of my mother standing in the lobby, arguing with a security guard. I had a choice. Elena had told me earlier that I could settle. I could offer to drop the criminal referrals in exchange for a buyout. I could take the 20,000, plus maybe 100,000 more, and walk away. I could let them keep the company, keep the lies, keep the facade. It would be easier. It would be peaceful. Choose truth over peace. If I walked away, they would do it again. They would find another victim. They would rewrite history. They would say I was crazy, that I had been paid off to go away. And Grandpa's legacy, the business he built with honest hands, would continue to be a vehicle for their greed. I looked at the $20,000 in my bank account, the money that had started it all. It wasn't a settlement, it was a war chest. I opened my car door. I wasn't going to settle. I wasn't going to take a payout. I was going to take the company. I was going to strip the rot out of the walls. I was going to rename it. And if that meant I never sat at a Thanksgiving table with Eleanor and Kyle again, well, I realize now that I had never really been sitting at a table with family. I had been sitting at a table with creditors. I got in the car and started the engine. I put the car in gear and drove out of the lot. Leaving the Henderson family drama in the rearview mirror, shrinking with every mile, I had a business to run. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed Stella's journey from the responsible one to the one who finally took charge. It is a long road to stand up to the people who are supposed to protect us. But sometimes, the truth is the only inheritance that matters. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below and tell me where you are listening from. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. And if you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to Revenge Stories and share your thoughts in English. What would you have done in Stella's shoes? Would you have taken the money and run, or stayed to fight? Let me know. See you in the next story.